and happy today to have Dr. Mark Bennecke with us, a biologist who works in many areas. In the past, he worked with the FBI investigating crime scenes. He is politically active, an acclaimed best-selling author of non-fiction books, and I think I say as much, he is especially fascinated by insects. That is also the connection to our event today when he will talk with us about the global loss of biodiversity. I really don't want to imagine a world without the fauna we need for the cycle of life. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Matthias has a very cute German accent. My German accent is also very thick, so be prepared for some strong German accent talk here. It is 5:10 now approximately, so we decided that I will speak for 1 hour, so that would make it 6:10, and then afterwards you have maybe, depending on how much time you wish to spend on Q&A, approximately half an hour, because after that everybody wants to go home at SAP. So that's approximately the schedule. I'm a biologist, and as you heard, I also work in crime cases. I'm an officially sworn in and certified forensic biologist, and I work in a lot of countries with a lot of strange cases, and I'm used to use a lot of data to bring them to real life use and to actual real life solutions, mostly in the courtroom or to answer questions criminalistically. I will share this, and I will, I leave it like that, and I will come straight to the point and share my screen. It did work before, so chances are good that it's going to work now, but sometimes it doesn't, but we will find a solution there. No, it does work. All right, this is my logo, my company's logo, and the eyes mean that our team is supposed to look into all directions. Moreover, it means that every eye is a whole, because we are dealing in my job with dead material. So the hole means that some information can pass through that hole. So the more eyes we have, the more holes we have that can shed some light into the darkness of whatever the question is. So if it's a criminalistic question, then we have information. So it's symbolically, it means the more data we have, but also the more holes or people who allow us to transport that information into the case, the better it is. Since I'm a criminalist, I just want to start with one a picture that shows you the whole thing. It's a circle of life that we try to apply in criminal cases. So usually it's blowflies and beetles and other animals that may give us information about what happened, about the so-called postmortem interval, etc. And to do that, we need to know our animals, our species. We also need to know a little bit about humans, but mostly about plants and air and water and all the stuff that usually people find very boring when it comes to describing them. In your area, it's a little bit, if you pull up, let's say, an Excel table to a biologist who works in the field, then probably the person will have the very strong urge to go back to the field and not to work with that Excel sheet. So we try to bring this all together, but we are very much used to a sleeves up approach. That means we want to work with something that is actually really applicable in real cases. On March 19, so that was, I think, 2 days ago, there was the global climate strike, and I want to begin with that because this is a Fridays for Future strike. I'm an old man, and I just stand there and support them a little bit. And from the beginning they started, and I don't want to restrict myself to insects, but also to the system integration, as you would probably call it at SAP. Die Erde hat Fieber. The Earth has a raised temperature, That is problem number one. It's called hothouse Earth in scientific terms, and that means that our whole planet is becoming a hothouse in which you possibly or probably some plants are growing more, but others are growing less well, because of course the climate changes on Earth all the time. That's not a big deal, but our culture, especially our technological culture, like deep learning, you all know that doesn't exist for quite such a long time, but also just very practical things like a server farm needs a certain environment in which this can operate, and you cannot just put a server farm like 400 kilometers away because the climate changed and then the water is raising, let's say salty water is pouring in, or the whole environment dries out and nobody can live there anymore. So this is very practical. Climate change by itself is not a problem, it's just a problem for human cultures. So all other animals are going to adapt, many are going to die out, as you will see, but life on Earth is not threatened. What is threatened is human culture, and human culture is very much threatened. So the kids usually restrict themselves to what they can deal with, so that's not so much numbers and facts, but mostly they know that something is going very wrong and that the adults, out of their perspective, are just using up the resources. One big problem, for example, is that we need a change in all our traffic systems, and since they are planned for a very long time, usually 30, 40 years in advance, this doesn't stop quickly enough for the goals that are laid out scientifically. So by now we have probably 5 to 10 years for a radical, complete, total, full change of the whole, everything we thought to be something that is just given and normal, for example transport, but we will have to switch to bicycles and public transport, and for some applications maybe to electromobility, but it's not, it won't work the way that we thought it would work by just switching to electromobility. Also, last thing that I wanted to show you from the Fridays kids is by now they have grannies for future, as grandparents for future, parents for future, health professionals for future, everything for future. And health for future is very interesting because you probably did not hear that due to climate change, really very high numbers, the current estimate is around 9 million people die exclusively due to climate change every year. Now, since Corona, you know that 8 million people dying is probably not that much, but it's a number that if you put it in relation with like a small town or a small city, is really, really a lot, because 8 million people, that's a lot of small towns. To come to this year, several reports came out. I just want to mention two, and since you are all nerds and I talk a little bit more about numbers compared to when I give a talk to school pupils and so on, I just want to point you to that, and you can do your research yourself, but I will show a little bit more numbers than I usually do. This is a report by in German, es wäre das Finanzministerium, so that's the Ministry of Finances, the British one. And the British are legendary for a very long time for the fact that they are merchants. So they were trading things over the seas, and they had to be merchants. And even Charles Darwin, one of the most beloved and best biologists that we in our field of the biology had, was calculating a lot. For example, he calculated the value of rainworms, the worms in the earth, earthworms. Very good book by Charles Darwin. So this is why I show you this report, which made a huge impact in our field, because they were calculating how much is life on Earth and biodiversity and species diversity, how much is it worth? And I just show you two figures that they chose to show in the report. This is all very recent, published 2021. This is one study from two colleagues, Managi and Kumar, from 2018. And what you can see is that the main problem, before we start to talk about species in particular, is that the change in global wealth is going up a lot. You can see that from the stupid SUVs that are driving around everywhere and clogging the streets. They are like dinosaurs. really, SUVs sind nicht nur zum Kotzen, but they are also dinosaurs. They in the bad sense, I mean, not in the good sense. Everybody likes dinosaurs, but I mean in the symbolic sense. They should not exist anymore. They should never have existed in the first place, because what you can see is the produced capital is going up. People can buy whatever they want. Human capital is something that you at SAP have a lot to deal with, because all of you have to be super highly qualified, so I don't have to mention that. But the problem is that at the same time, this is all exclusively built on using the resources of nature. I don't want to go into depth too much, because you can look up the papers by yourself, but these numbers are solid numbers. These are not estimates like 40 years ago, where everybody had to estimate a little bit and, you know, macht so Hochrechnungen machen, so to check and have a lot of variables, but these are actual numbers that are like true numbers. So what you can see is, this is capitalism. You use something, human labor, or in this case, nature capital, to produce money that we can spend, and meanwhile Earth is destroyed. You probably all have heard that since you were children, but now we have data on that. That's number one. So if you want to look more on the financial side, you can look that up now. And the second figure that they chose, there are many more figures of course in that British report, is also from 2018, and that is something that was also very difficult to put in numbers before, but now we can do that. It's the declining oxygen levels in oceans and coastal waters, and as you can see, if you're not colorblind, for the people who are colorblind, I will try to put it in words. So for example, on the east coast of the United States, all the water is becoming low on oxygen levels, and that means that many animals cannot live there anymore, obviously, and also on the northern coast of Europe, but also at the southern coast and on many other coasts. And you all know what happens when you don't have oxygen anymore. Circle of life collapses, and that of course poses also financial dangers, because then you just cannot use those resources anymore, as you have seen in the picture before. So even if you are a straight up capitalist and you don't give a fuck about anything else except of money, then even then you are highly threatened. So the whole financial system is going to collapse under the threat of species decline. The second report that came out this year was a report by the United Nations, and I won't go into detail anymore, because like I said, you can look it up. But this is an official United Nations statement from this year. On the first pages, you can read the sentence that we all quote now as biologists: there is an urgent need for a clear break with current trends of environmental decline, and the coming decade is crucial. This is why I just said before, we have 5 to 10 years left. Imagine that. You all remember what you did, probably most of you remember what you did in the past 5 to 10 years. That was a lot. You did a lot, but it's not that much time. It's for human standards, it's something, especially when you are socioeconomically advanced as you all are, this is something that you usually can deal with. You could tell yourself, it's no problem to deal with the next 5 to 10 years financially, economically, environmentally. There may be risks and things that can always happen, like a traffic accident or something, but apart from that, our financial and ecological structures are not going to fully collapse. But that is not true. That is the problem. Why everybody has a stupid excuse. In German, ich esse Biofleisch, ne? I'm only eating bio meat, and all the other lies. That's all just self-deception and lies. So to give you a little bit some spotlights on some data. When I went to the International Congress of Dipterology, that really exists, in 2018, you have seen that 2018 was a year when several studies came up. I presented some data about a study that you will see very soon, the so-called Krefeld Study. And even my colleagues, even my own colleagues, who are highly specialized in dipterology, the science of flies and what we as biologists consider to be flies. So even the one that looks a little bit weird to you in the top left corner is a fly. in our meaning of biological terms, they could not perceive what I was saying. They were like, Mark, it cannot be that bad, even though they all see the species decline. So this is a psychological problem which comes to the financial problem. People are not used to financial collapses in our times, and they are also not used to even the scientists are not aware of the width of the extreme impact that is already going on. So just to show an example, if you're a little bit younger, let's say you are under the age of 35, then probably you have never seen that. If you collected dirt somewhere in a corner, when I was younger, then you would see this. On this picture you can see that most of the material that was dirt or dust was insects. It was you see like cute beetles, wasps, blowflies, butterflies, night flyers, moth, etc. But today, when you collect dust or dirt or something like that, you will mostly see fibers from clothing or hair or skin flakes, but you won't see insects anymore. This happened very quickly, very, very quickly. We know the numbers, we know the time intervals, I will show you. But today you won't see that anymore, especially not in a city. This dirt was collected in the middle of Cologne, I have to say. This is in the middle of Cologne, the 4th largest city in Germany, which has around 1 million inhabitants. So it's highly, for German standards or for European standards, it's a big city. Also, what we don't see anymore, this is something that you probably won't, you have no frame of reference for this, is that even the insects on corpses are disappearing, especially the blowflies. Blowflies are super robust animals. These are the shiny green ones on the top of the image here. And in 2003, when we had the first heat wave, all of a sudden our blowflies, the shiny green ones and the shiny blue ones, disappeared. And we were like, what is going on? We didn't even see that this had anything to do with the heat, even though it was very, very hot 2003 in Germany and in other parts of the world too. But even the very robust and very quickly breeding animals were all of a sudden just gone, and our corpses were eaten up by wasps all of a sudden. This had never happened before. I know the literature about insects on corpses since the 13th century, 13th century, and this was never ever reported, that wasps would eat the corpses. So this is really something new, and you probably have heard that we had the hottest summers in the last years, and if you read the scientific literature in the last 2 weeks, you probably know that we are living in the time with the worst drought, also die größte Trockenheit, since more than 2,000 years, directly measured by comparing the rings in wood of oaks. This was done in Czech oaks and Bavarian oaks, and the chemical composition, oxygen and carbon, and also comparing it with ice cores from ice. So this is directly measured. We know that we have a super heat wave, and we know that we have the most severe drought, the Trockenheit, Dürre, in Europe since more than 2,000 years. Again, I'm sorry to pester you with stressing everything 10 times, but this is directly measured. I know a lot about these insects, just to give you an idea how I know it, because I collect also old insects. For example, here, this is at the mummies of Palermo in Italy, and we go there and we collect very old insects that are hundreds of years old in archaeological diggings and so on. So this, because sometimes people say, how do you know about insects from hundreds of years ago? Well, I know of them because the oldest case that I had was the holy or Saint Severin from a church around the corner, where I also checked the insects, and they were 1,600 years old. Just that, because some of you could maybe think, okay, how does he know about these old insects? I'm also involved in that. It doesn't matter because I'm just reporting the studies to you, but this is something that sometimes is brought over by conspiracy theorists or something like that, who say, okay, how would you know that? He's just part of a conspiracy or something. So we know, this is from the very good movie Watchmen, which probably all nerds of you know by heart, and also the comic book series. But for those of you who don't know it, it's a very good movie and very good comic series, the highest sold comic series ever, called Watchmen again. And there is a scene in there that shows that it's very close, also kurz vor 12, yeah, it's close to 12, as we say in Germany. So we don't have much time anymore. And the problem is, that was a few years ago. Now we switched into a region where it's past 12. So the time for negotiations and political adjustments is not there. We don't have that time anymore. That is new for human culture. Formerly, human cultures were used to catastrophic events, but usually there was room for negotiations, room for adjustments and so on, but we don't have that anymore because it's past 12 already. That is something that has to sink in very deeply, especially in politicians and probably also all of you, that we are in the middle of the shit already. Deep, deep, deep in the middle of the shit, measured and calculated by actual numbers. To give you an example, we sent out a student for it. That was a criminal case, and we needed to know how many insects are at the edge of a forest. So we sent out Markus Halbach. This is the student here, and he, you know, for you it must seem very archaic, but we don't have money in biology and in forensics. And he set up some measuring devices, some dead piglets, and he set up a trap. This will be important very soon. This looks very, very simple for you probably, and again, sleeves up, as I mentioned before, but it's a very good trap. It's called a Malaise Trap by a colleague by the name of Malaise. So it's not the illness malaise like in French, but it's just the name of a colleague. And what you do is you set up a trap, tent-like, you put in holes. Probably you can see that there are some holes in the plastic covering. And on top you have a dying, it's a flask in which there's a liquid, so whenever an insect flies in, it's going to die. The insects, however, do not perceive the dying liquid, the liquid which kills them, but they fly in because they're attracted, in this case, to a corpse. So this is just an example study. And we were very, very, very surprised. All of us, I mean now the scientific community worldwide, because I presented this in two meetings, in two worldwide meetings, and everybody was like, what? Nobody knew that. What you see here is Markus determined all the species that he found on the pigs over several months, and the tiny dots that you see on the right are all different species of flies. On the left you see that inside of the forest you have a different composition of species compared to the outside. That was interesting for us criminalistically because a dead person was found on the edge of a forest. Now, why do I show you something that must be very boring to you because you're not biologists? I'm showing this to you because A, you can determine the species composition inside and outside of a forest, which was good for us, safely, statistically sound and safe, but also you get an idea of how many insects are attracted to a corpse. And like I said before, nobody knew that because many of these insects use the corpse, for example, just for orientation purposes, because they meet. So female and male flies meet there, but they do not use the corpse in the sense of eating it or using it as a breeding ground. So that was unknown before. Now, imagine that. That was a few years ago, and even the highly specialized colleagues had no idea about the number of species that were there. So that means that until, let's say, 30 years ago, most people had no funding, no interest. It was even considered to be ridiculous to look at the insects of a city. For example, when I was a student, there were several colleagues who collected all insects of Cologne. It was a big study called Die Insekten von Köln, Insects of Cologne. And everybody in our biology department was like, ah, that's so sweet. That's like 200 years ago, collecting insects, tee-hee-hee. You know, nobody took that serious apart from like me and the colleagues who did it and several others. But apart from that, this was considered to be like kids science. This is for kids, just collect insects. But you will see that changed a lot, as you will see soon. Maybe I will just jump to that study. and not go too much into detail here. And here's the thing. Here is the thing. There's a scientific journal, it's called PLOS, in which you can publish everything that is scientifically sound. So it's a generalist journal. Some of my colleagues, the second one is Martin Zorg, with whom I presented the paper at the Congress that I already mentioned, the Dipterologists Congress in Namibia, and many others. They collected insects over a very long time in a working group in Krefeld. It's a small town in Germany. And they found, as you can see in the headline, more than 75% of the insects are gone. But not only of the species, but also of the biomass. That means you collect the insects with a Malaise trap. You saw, of course, they had a more advanced trap or more advanced traps. So the insects fly in, but not to corpses this time. They collected everything, all insects. They collected them in a Malaise trap, and they were dead, so they could very easily check them under a microscope, determine the species, but also do something very simple, which most people didn't do before. They just put them on a scale. Also die haben die einfach gewogen. They just checked what the total biomass was. And the loss of biomass was also there. So the species were gone and the biomass was gone. And in the beginning, most people thought that just can't be. I mean, over 25 years, that's impossible, because all of you know what this means. If you have a species decline that is so much over the regular species decline, maybe I'll show you later what the regular species decline is, then we are not, like I said before, deep in the shit, but we are at the end of the world as we know it. And of course, even biologists and mathematicians and so on, they were like, nah. That must be a statistical error. For example, my colleague Walter Krämer, who is a professor for statistics, he said, okay, it may be true, but the statistical methods need to be improved here. And then most of the newspapers wrote, oh, what a relief, there's a statistical error here. So I'll show you what my colleagues did. For those of you who are not from Germany and who have never heard of Krefeld, this is Africa and Europe, etc. And then we get a little bit closer. You see there's the orange-yellow circle, that's Germany. And then we get more closer. And then for those of you, depending on where you work, we live in a highly industrialized region here. It's the Rhine-Ruhr region. It's a region with a very, very high population density in Europe. But it's still very green. But the green is mostly green that is more or less used for the purposes of, as you saw before in the economic diagram, of using nature to make money out of it and to get it properly into squares and, like not having anything wild there. Krefeld is now, probably you have seen that, it's in the white dotted circle. And when you get closer, at the beginning, you could think, it's relatively rural and relatively nice. But that is not the case, because now you see the squarification, so to speak, of nature here. So there's not much nature there, but it's used agriculturally. And the problem was that this is where they actually collected the insects. Yes, Florian?
There were some questions about what can we do in the chat, and I think we will lead over to this further at a later point of the discussion. One question which came also up now, which might be related to this one, is a kind of insect hotels. These boxes where you can support insects.
Let's talk about that later.
Does it help, or we can come to this if there is.
Okay. We can talk about that in the chat, because the short answer is no. But being a biologist and having a lot of insect hotels, I can tell you about the use and the advance and why it's still helpful. But it would be better if I would give you some numbers first, because then we have a foundation for the discussion.
Okay, let's go on.
Yeah. This is the Malaise Trap, and now we have a nice as I said, to you, I can show that tables. On the left, you can see they started collecting that in 1989, where this was really considered to be layman's, entertainment, something like that. And they went on and on and on. They still do that. I just show you the data until 2016. And the number of samples is high enough. That's not the statistical problem. You can see that the mean exposure time is also very high. In case you can check that here quickly, because the number of days is really high. You have hundreds and thousands of days. So this is really perfectly okay, and it's not just something that is done quickly. They did it for 46 years, if you want to calculate it very stupidly. They had 1,500 trap samples, and for you as non-biologists, that's not so relevant. So I will just switch to something that you can easily comprehend, being persons who work with data, if you want it or not. Now, what we do, because I mentioned in the beginning, we are interested in humidity and everything. And the colleagues started to check what is the main influence on this disappearance of insects. And as you can see here is, we first thought it's mostly dryness, because the Earth is getting hotter and drier, at least in those parts that we are interested in. But that's not the case. If you look on the left, you see on the scale, you see the contribution to insect biomass development. So this is biomass now, not the species. You see that the hugest bar, they even had to separate it by a whitish bar, is unknown. That is unprecedented. Usually in biology, when we have so much data, we don't get a huge bar that says unknown. I've never in my life seen a study like that as a biologist. Never, ever. So that is not good. Now the question was, what the hell? What is it? And one possible answer is, and this relates to the insect hotels, because this is why I'm a little bit switching back and forth now, is that most of the crop protecting poisons that we put into our fields will not go away. To put it in very simple terms, you put them in, but they will stay there for 20 years, especially neonicotinoids. And some of you maybe have heard from your parents, and if you are old like I am, you still remember that DDT was a very toxic insect killing poison that was used. This got enriched in birds because they were eating insects, and then the birds died. All right. So let's say the toxicity of DDT is 1. Now the neonicotinoids that we are using in our fields agriculturally go down. You see, for example, they are called Cruiser, Regent, Gaucho, Poncho, and so on. Karate is also a nice one. These are insecticides. They are like, let's use a Poncho. It's 10,000 times more toxic for insects compared to DDT. DDT, for the younger ones of you, was the nightmare of our parents. It had to be completely eradicated out of agricultural processes. Sometimes it can still be used, but usually it's practically forbidden. And now we are using something that is 10,000 times more toxic to insects, and it stays in the ground for, let's say, 10 to 20 years. So for you being used, let's say you're a programmer, this is a program error. You know, this is like inserting a semicolon instead of a dot into your whatever, PHP or whatever, C++ or whatever advanced, more advanced stuff you use. But the problem is, it's obvious. So, you know, you see that, you directly see that. Let's say you have like a stupid HTML program, you know, for kids that gives you a little red indication where the error in your program is, and you say, it doesn't matter. The program is not running anymore. It is a clear, obvious error that is known to everybody, but people are just not addressing the problem. Florian?
Just a question, what does it mean, multiple times of toxicity? Is this...
How many insects do you kill?
So how is it measured? Is it just
the number
unit?
Yeah, to make it simple in this case, it means you can kill with the same amount, you can kill, instead of 1 insect, you can kill 10,000 insects. Of course, it's more complicated depending on the insects, but that is what is meant. Now, okay, so So now you are already there and we could stop, but I still have a few minutes left. So I just want to show you some numbers that you probably can better relate to, because there are some larger animals that you are probably more interested in, because you could say, hey, I'm happy, I like all critters and everything that has 6 and 8 legs. I hate that anyway, so you know. Let's oh no, let me show you something about the worms first, because I mentioned Charles Darwin and the Earthworms. This is the book and the formation of vegetable mold. That means everything that grows except of tomatoes. they grow on cotton balls by now, but mostly you need an intact nature. Since I mentioned the earthworms, I just want to show you again. I can do this a little bit more nerdily because most of you are nerdy enough. On the left, you see the grain yield. Of course, this is going up and up and up. You heard that we are using nature more efficiently. So on the left, you see the grain yield, the crop yield, and on the bottom, on the axis, you just see the years. In this case, until 2020. And the earthworm number, in case you're not colorblind, you can see the brown part of this diagram is just going down. So we have less earthworms. So by now you say, okay, we understood it. All the animals are dying, also the earthworms, whatever. But that's not the problem. The closer we look, and this happens every time since 5 years now. Every time we look closer, we see that there is something much worse behind it, even though that is already as worse as it can ever get. Because it's not only that the number of earthworms is going down, but they are shrinking in size. So now earthworms, if you think about it capitalistically, like in the British study, you could say, okay, they are cheap work, they are cheap laborers, they work for us for free. But if they are getting smaller and smaller and weaker and less, then your slaves, your work slaves are they can't work anymore. They just can't, because they are dying, because they are too small. And this is, on the one hand, this is good economically, because now the economists are starting to fear about their money. But at the same time, we see that this is something that we cannot revert on. We cannot wait for reverting it in a shorter interval. And then just to show you some numbers of animals, for example, let's say you like elephants. Elephants have a feature that you probably don't know. If you leave elephants in peace, they will just reproduce. Elephants are totally, they just reproduce and explode. That's the only thing you need to do. Give them land, give them an environment in which they can breed, and you will have too many elephants. So they're very easy. If you just leave them alone, they're very easygoing. In the early 20th century, there were 10 million elephants on Earth. For 2025, the projection is that we will have 160,000 left. Imagine that. Imagine that. This means that even animals that everybody loves, that everybody gives, you can have, like, from WWF or, any institution could collect money for elephants. Everybody's going to give, $1 or $2. But even those animals are dying out. And this is not because of neonicotinoids or dryness by itself, but it's because humans suffer from dryness, loss of water, loss of areas because the sea levels are rising and so on. And they are going into the areas where the animals live. So they just steal the land and the food from the animals. And this is why the rise of the oceans is such a problem, because people are going to go in places where other animals live. So this accelerates the dying of the animals, but at the same time, it means that it becomes even more irreversible. So imagine you had such a problem with SAP. Let's say you will have to develop any infrastructure for a customer. You look into the problem and you see that the problem is self-deteriorating itself. It's a self-deteriorating spiral. I mean, what would you do? You would either reject to continue to work on the project, or you would take measures to cut the spiral so that the spiraling down stops. But we don't do that. We just don't fucking do it. As you can see here. Another example, very recently, a few days ago, I sat with a colleague from Museum König. It's a very small museum in Germany, but it's famous because after the war, something relating to the German constitution happened there. And it was also the capital city of Germany, Bonn, for a few decades before Berlin became this capital city again. So they have some funding. It's a very good museum. It's on the highest level of research, so it's not only just a biological museum. And the colleague, young female colleague, very friendly, very quiet. Just, I think 4 days ago, she gave a Zoom conference. And I was just like, oh, cute, let's have a look at some nice animals in Africa. Because I'm a biologist and I like to watch, you know, like cute parrots cuddling each other and every type of animal. I love life. That's the thing that I love most, life, any type of life. I have earthworms as my pet animals here in the laboratory. I have roaches, hissing roaches as pet animals. I really love life. And not human life, any life. And she was just talking very calmly. And then she said, yeah, when I came back to my field of research, again, nature reserve, as in the Krefeld study. We are talking about a completely protected area. I came back and she's working with an animal. I will call it an antelope now. This is not fully correct, but let's call it an antelope. And she's like, you know, because she's young, so she's not referring to numbers from like 30 years ago. She's like, when I was there, 2010, in my area, we had 5,000 of them. And then, you know, I was surprised there were only 819 left. And then she continues with her talk as if nothing happened. And then afterwards in the discussion, I asked her, did you publish that? And she's like, yeah, that was the first thing I did. I was really surprised. No terror in her voice, no excitement, totally calm. So no matter where you go, no matter which species you look at, I won't even start to talk about amphibs, because that would be then that you couldn't sleep anymore. Everything dies in an exponential rate. Everything we look at. No matter if there is a statistical uncertainty a little bit and this and that, it matters not. The better the studies get, the more we see the exponential decline of life on Earth. No matter how recent you go. Remember the quote from United Nations. We need an immediate cut of everything that we consider to be normal type of lifestyle. I mean, imagine that statement. If you would have made that statement 10 years ago, you would have considered to be a left-wing or right-wing activist, a stupid idiot, or a fanatic person. But this comes now from the Treasury, the Ministry of Finances of England, and from the United Nations, not from activists. Maybe just one final thing, and then probably it's better to give you room for questions and answers. Because I told you I want to show you the background dying out rate of animals, and then a final thing, what does it mean in over millions of years? And then I will just stop, and then I can show you more depending on your questions. Number one, on the left of the scale, you see the extinction rate of mostly animals that are that you would call like interesting animals. You know, like animals that somebody really likes and that are very well researched. So that's on the left, that's the extinction rate. And on the bottom, again, you see just the years. So 1500 means year 1500, and 1800 means year 1800. This goes now to 2015 or 2014, and the paper is from 2015. You already know what would happen if I would show you the same data from 2021. Let's look at the background level. The background level is the black dotted line on the bottom. It shows you that, of course, species are dying out all the time and new species emerge. And of course, since we have industrialization and more humans on Earth, you would probably expect linearly that, you know, some species die out. I mean, that's the price for human culture as we know it. And I think everybody could live with that. So that's the background level. Now look at, let's take birds. If you are colorblind, the birds are obviously the second from the top. So you can, and for those of you who are not colorblind, it's the violet, reddish line. And you can see that there are a lot of data from museums of natural history, reports of people who were traveling, but also from, how should I call it? Okay, I hope no geologists will ever see or paleontologists will ever see the talk. Let's call it fossils. It's not really fossils, of course, but it's like old findings. You see that the birds are dying out, whatever you would call it. Let's call it exponentially or whatever you want to call it. They are dying out with increasing rate. Let's look at mammals, also Säugetiere. That's the blue line. They are also dying out with a quickly accelerating pace. Look at vertebrates in general, the green line. Looks exponential to me. Look at other vertebrates. Looks pretty bad to me, starting, of course, with industrialization, but it may also be an effect of that nobody looked at those animals before as closely as with other animals that you could bring home as a trophy or that were reported by natural scientists. Why 1500? The reason is that many of the reports that we have start in the 16th century with so-called Tierbücher, books about animals. It became interesting and fanciful to look at animals. So we have a lot of reports from that time. But again, there was a lot of research done by colleagues to look into the past by looking into archives, digging and looking into the soil, etc. You see the problem. Last thing, let's look a little bit more into the area of millions of years. Probably you have heard that we have the worst extinction of life on Earth since humans exist on Earth. This is now a scale again. On the bottom you see the years, but these are millions, millions of years. So on the right, this is very recent, so now. And if you go on the bottom to the left, then we are 500, 600 million years from now. And on the scale that goes from the top to the bottom, on the left, you see the number of genera. Genera means, for example, you have Homo sapiens, that's a species. And then you could have Homo erectus, that's another type of human being. And then the genus is Homo. So we are not on the level of a species, but a little bit higher, but still for our terms, relatively low. In the taxonomic classification. So that means how we put all life and all species into certain drawers, so to speak. And the number of genera that are looked at paleontologically, so over a very long time, is, let's say, 3,000, because that's the highest number on the scale on the left. And you can see it's going up and down and looks a little bit erratic. But we know that certain catastrophic events happened. You can see that in stone. This is the job that paleontologists do. And you see there's a little number, red number 1. That was the first severe species extinction. You see how quickly the slope or the decline goes. Then you see a second one, and then a third one, and then a fourth one. And the animals that are depicted there, or the forms of life that are depicted there, are so-called light fossilien. The most important fossils that show you that there was a severe break if you dig into stone or mud that was fossilized and so on. And then there was a fifth one. That is the one that every kid knows, especially all of you former nerd kids. That was the extinction of the dinosaurs. And now we are in the sixth one. This is the largest extinction of life measured, directly measured. In the history of human beings, it's the first one that we ever encountered, especially in such a speed. Like I said, unprecedented. We are talking about 25 years. Everything dies. In many areas, even of Germany, you won't hear one single bird anymore. I was in a forest 2019, in which I did not hear one single bird. Not one beep. Zero. Zilch. Nothing. Unbelievable. For those of you who are younger, I have to explain that. When 30 years ago or 40 years ago, when you went into a forest, especially in spring or in even summer, because the summers weren't that hot, but even in autumn, it was like in a concert hall. It really was. You heard voices from everywhere. It was as if you went into the Elbphilharmonie or into any philharmonic concert. You had all types of voices, all types of instruments, from the top, from the bottom, flying around. Gone. It's just gone. And so we have the largest extinction ever encountered as long as humans live on Earth, and it's the 6th species decline in the history of life on Earth. Proven, measured, not a statistical thing, but directly measured. You remember, sometimes just on a scale, sometimes done with other methods by comparing it to the background extinction and so on and so on. But that's it. Oh no, maybe one final thing concerning the hothouse. This is also quite a recent publication. If you want to boil it down to one problem, which is maybe something that you are at SAP used to, because you want to know how to solve the problem from the root, to use a German expression, to find out what the root of the problem is. The root of the problem is the heating of Earth, that the Earth is heating up. And you can see that over the time, that is one of the scales here, and the stability of the, let's call it, of the heat system of Earth. Earth is rolling down into a kind of a pit, down to hothouse Earth, as I called it before, and as everybody in our field calls it. Now our only hope, until the time that this very good paper came out, this is a very high-ranked journal. PNAS is a very, very good journal. Due to, you can probably read that, human emissions, biosphere degradation, so everything that I talked about, intrinsic feedbacks, that would be the problem with, let's say, use neonicotinoids and just separate the land into different areas. It's just rolling down over the planetary threshold. And the hope was that we could stabilize Earth, and that's what the Fridays for Future kids want, at 1.5% degrees Celsius, and then we can stabilize Earth. We will not go back to the original levels. That will, if we do something in the next 5 years, radically, which will not happen because nobody is ready to do a radical thing, then it would go back to normal levels probably in 100 to 150 years, which is of no relevance for you and your kids. No practical relevance, because by then we have migration events and so on. Yeah, Florian? I'm done.
Just to understand the graphic, I think that's really interesting, but it goes, the time is from top to bottom, and the place where the ball rose is this kind of stabilization points. The level above is to get it from one to another.
Exactly.
So if you want to go to the cool side, we have to push it over the hill. With a lot of effort or just with a little bit of effort. And once it's down in the bottom, it's really too much to get it back up.
Exactly. Thank you. Very good, Florian. Because thank you for mentioning that. Because this is exactly what the Fridays kids want. The Fridays kids, they are like, don't negotiate anymore, because financially, that's not what the Fridays kids say. That's what I'm telling you, because you are in one of the largest companies on Earth. It will not be possible to do it financially. I, as a biologist, would say, okay, these thresholds cannot be like overcome biologically. But since you're not biologists, let's say it cannot be done financially anymore. It is not possible. And exactly like you said. So this is what the diagram shows. And this should be the last picture now. To me, it looks like this. You have the stone rolling for our human perception. If you're not a biologist or not a climatologist or not a person working in the field of climate change, you could say, okay, the stone is like, this stone is moving very slowly. But the thing is, there's only one direction for this stone. It could roll a little bit to the left, it could roll a little bit to the right, but it's going to roll down the hill. And it will right now take a lot of effort to put it back up, or to leave it where it is and stabilize it. That's also a huge task. But what we cannot do anymore is just leave it be. And that's the state in the March 2021 in which we are talking right now. We have a super severe problem. This is the safely calculated rise of water levels until 2050. Hamburg and Bremen will be unter dem Meeresspiegel, under the flat level of the ocean. The huge parts of the Netherlands are already evacuated. Did you know that, if you are German? Did you know that the first dike line is already evacuated in the Netherlands? Quietly, of course, but they did it already. Did you know that, I mean, in Bremen and Hamburg, they will put up some structures, but you can imagine how much they're going to cost. Bangladesh is going to be partially under that flat level or the surface level. So you see, let's only talk about money. At the end of the day, it's a money problem. Okay, and now I stop a little bit earlier to give you more room for question and answers.
Many thanks for your depressing information and the call to action and about the exponential decline of life that I noted down. What do you think is the cause for most of the insect and species decline? Is it that we have a poison crisis like the pesticides, or is it more like the heat, or is it a combination, but in our area it's more a poison, the poisons that we put into the environment?
This is interrelated. The one measure that is the most easy to take and to use worldwide and even in our region is CO2. So let's cut CO2 to a zero level, become completely climate neutral, fully climate neutral, and the real climate neutral, not the fake stuff that many energy companies do and many countries just do by calculating back and forth. So we need to be climate neutral or CO2 neutral. But the poisons are interrelated, because that was the first diagram that I did show you. Capitalism, I'm a friend of capitalism. I like capitalism, but I don't like the idea that classical capitalism must maximize the profits. That is the root of the problem. Capitalism is okay because then you can put people into their positions and they can, work for the other people as much as they really can, and probably in a good way. But the maximization of profits will always lead to the idea that you can also maximize profits out of nature. And this leads to bringing poisons into nature. But the poison alone is not the problem, because let's say you don't disallow all the poison. Then the next step is to use more land. And because then the I know that because I talk to the agricultural people, also Bauernverband, etc. So the organization of all agriculturally working people, and they are like, okay, if you want bio-vegan, we give you bio-vegan, but then we will need like the X-fold amount of land, no problem. And so the only way to deal with that problem is that no animal products are used anymore. We must not today, not tomorrow in the morning, but in your next meal today, you must not use eggs, milk, leather as clothing. You cannot use this anymore. This is the common answer to your question from all reports. 100% of all reports, scientific reports, that were given in the past, let's say 2 years, recommend the complete, full, non-negotiable use of exclusively plants as food and clothing materials. This is scientific consent. There's no, because usually you have like an extra opinion or something like that, like a few people have a different opinion on that, and then the whole discussion starts again. But we are beyond that discussions. 12:05. Even meat-eating people report in their reports that everybody must not use milk, eggs, chicken, and so on. To give you a number, 90% of all birds on planet Earth are chicken.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, some questions we are trying to or others of us to collect them and cluster them, because there are quite a lot of them go into the direction, what can we do? Now we heard a clear answer to that. That's also, some of them asked, can we have something uplifting in between?
Yes,
so
yes,
shocking.
yes.
So,
yes, I can give you a lot of uplifting things. Number one, the number of, we call it psychopath gardens, Vorgärten, deutsche Vorgärten. In biology, we call them psychopath gardens. So that means clean-cut garden, a British lawn. The area that is privately owned for, let's say, leisure and beauty and you know, just because you own a little piece of land, is larger, if you look at this globally, than all nature reserves, all protected nature areas. So if every person this spring, today, not tomorrow, will not mow their lawn anymore until the end of the year, until the breeding season is over. This is also good for nightingales, for example, because they need crappy, chaotic lawns with sticks and, you know, remote areas, because they're breeding on the floor, not in nests in the trees. But also for insects. Then the only thing, like with elephants, you need to do is give nature its space. Do not use seeds. You don't need to buy one single seed, even if it's like a bee-friendly or insect-friendly seed. Just don't do it. Let your lawn grow and leave it in peace. And then the plants that will grow will be in interaction with the insects, because that's biology and evolution and biodiversity. And then the right insects and the right plants will be there without you doing anything. That's number one. You can do that tonight. Leave your lawn in.
I already started.
Perfect. So number yeah.
Okay, continue.
And
I just said we left a lot of Efeu and Brombeere.
Perfect.
Not English speaking. I only know IT, and if I don't trim at least those, it will just be two kinds everywhere.
Yes, but the poison ivy and whatever is growing and then overgrowing things, that is not much of a problem, because even if you cut it down a little bit, you will probably lose like 10% of the population in there, but that's not a problem for insects, because 10% is for insects, that's nothing, because they have such a high reproduction rate, that's going to be laughable for the insects. So don't worry. You can, or even if you mow your lawn or cut your lawn like once a year after the breeding season, no problem. No? But the thing is, nobody does that. People put stupid plants on there that don't belong here, and no insects can feed from these plants. They just look beautifully to humans, but they are of no use for any insect. So also relating to your insect hotels, have huge areas of insect hotels. I have every space in my on our laboratory balcony is just wild plants, and every year there are different plants. It's super interesting. We have no idea why, and different insects and even birds that are walking along and looking at me and so on. We're like, what are the birds doing here? And I still don't know. And so there's a lot of uplifting stuff, and also it's seelisch, psychologically, for your mental health. This is very good, because there were some studies conducted in the past 2 years that if you leave nature in peace and you see how nature interacts, of course, with you too, or you imagine it's interacting with you, that is highly uplifting, as you called it, for your mental health. This is proven. This is data. It's not like esoteric blah blah. So these are 3 uplifting things that you can do very quickly. And also, I really have to stress that change your fucking energy provider to an energy provider who provides true renewable energies. For example, Greenpeace energy. And if your company is not doing that, if you're in a huge company, then just try to make your company use it. Because the thing is, it's not expensive at all. That's just a lie. and many energy companies are just calculating back and forth until it sounds as if they are CO2 neutral, but CO2 neutrality may or may not be true, but the problem is it has to be fully renewable and in accordance with nature. And that is just very few energy companies do that. So you have the fourth very easy, empowering thing that you can do tonight.
I have a lot of questions. So maybe we can cover some of those still in the time we have. For example, we have a question. SAP is a business enabler with quite an impact. What do you think a company like us could contribute?
You just have to be persons who are living as, how should I call it, a lifestyle or a company lifestyle, so to speak, that just shows all other companies that it can be done. That's it. It's like parents have to be a guide for their kids, not by forbidding them to eat marmalade in between or a cookie in between, but by just showing them that, let's say, a carrot really not only tastes better, if it tastes better, to prove it, but also to show that you feel more dynamic and more energetic and it's more fun to grow carrots or whatever. You know, it has to be something that is believable, true, from your heart. And being such a huge company, it's also very important to show that it does not cost anything at extra, but at the same time it will save so much money. Look at the report of the British Treasury. So you can't go wrong by just being a good example. It's not possible. For example, I would tell you what I would do if I would be president of SAP. I would just say, okay, we are just going vegan now, and I will explain you why. We do let's say a 3-day break for everybody, and we explain why we do it. And you can shout at me, and you can hate me, and you can call me names, but I will calmly explain you exactly why we do it, because we are in the middle of the largest crisis of mankind. Measured, proven, you all are number people, and we want to be good examples, and we want to show everybody else that it can be done. And if you want to, you can have your sausage in your, in your pack, and nobody is going to diss you. This is also not allowed, so we are not, but we are just doing something instead of negotiating.
That's perfect. I think the terminology refers to something we have internally at SAP. We call it the exemplar and the enabler. And exemplar is that what we do as an example for other companies. Yeah. We try to show off things, and that's mainly the way that you said. Yeah. One other thing very specific, unique to SAP is that we kind of write the software that makes the other company not only just work, but it somehow has an impact on controlling their business. What they do, so how they see their numbers, what methods do they use to calculate stuff, all those things, the whole planning and all those things are there. SAP has started with some points to make more transparency on the ecological side of the business. But if you maybe have some ideas or spontaneous things on what exactly maybe should change in the software of all companies at the same time, that they change. And these changes that could be what would it be?
Okay, one thing that you already mentioned is what, for example, some of the companies do who are in how do you call that? Wie nennt ihr das? Mitbewerberschaft. There are other companies selling the same product from the food industry. They just, probably you saw that from Oatly and others, to say, show us your numbers. Show us your CO2 numbers. Just print your CO2 numbers. That's it. Everything else is going to go smoothly down there. But concerning the program code, I can just tell you what my wife, who's a programmer, what she usually does and what all of you do too. The less server time you need, the less processor time you need, I mean, but you do that anyways, the less CO2 you're going to produce. So, but that is obviously something that you do anyways, because you want to have, you don't want to have like screwed up Windows software, which that is far too bloated. So that is something that you probably already do.
I go quickly try to go through some other questions. We had some about, okay, this is the one thing that all leads to crops and basically animal animal usage in general, but are there other things? And what were the impacts of maybe microplastics to insects?
Yeah.
What about different types of cars? Is the exhaust?
Yeah.
Does it change to have a hydro car or e-car versus a carbon car?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, I'm not sharing the screen anymore. What I'm personally, because the food thing is true for me. It's clear you need to go vegan, if possible bio-vegan, but at the same time use less resources so that it's not on the coast of the land. Most of the land is used just to feed animals. It's really the picture that I showed you in the beginning. Transport must. I know that people from other countries find that strange that we Germans prefer to say must, also it really has to be done, but in this case, this is based on numbers. We need to have Verkehrswende, so that means no personal transport anymore. It's car sharing with any type of cars, hopefully not used based on fossil fuel, but apart from that, it should all be done by bikes and public transport. That is also calculated through. I didn't want to go into this now because I wanted to put it more on biology, but this is something that is thoroughly calculated through. No personal ownership of personal vehicles anymore. And this is something that also United Nations meant when they said radically, drastically, immediately. And everybody of you is now like, oh no, come on, my little Twingo or my little Smart, that can't be that bad. Okay, then you're part of the problem.
Okay. We had Sabine.
I've got one more question from the chat, which was really popular. What will help more to improve the situation? The small actions taken by us all as individuals, or the big steps and measures taken by those quotation marks in power?
Yeah. Well, those in power are elected in many countries by us, so at least in industrialized countries. So they are just representatives of ourselves. But it's a good question. And my personal statement until 3 days ago was that the small steps are the best, because das nennt man in German, it's called Demokratie der Füße, democracy of feet. So everybody has 2 feet. You do with your own feet what you can do. But then the Fridays... The older people from Fridays who are now like 25 or something, they were like, no, Mark, to do Verkehrswende, change in traffic and change in energy. Of course, we need politics because they can do it quickly. German Chancellor Angela Merkel just decided that we won't have nuclear power anymore, and then it happened. Nuclear power is a different topic of which I don't want to talk here because that is a very big problem when it comes to the whole energy change, but let's not talk about it. So let's not use fossil energy anymore. So both has to be done. But in my opinion, as somebody who realized in the past month that even my colleagues do not understand that, even though they see that everything dies, understand what it means for them personally, that these people who report that everything is dying are not going vegan and are still using their personal vehicle. And I'm like, but you just said 1 minute ago we cannot do that anymore. And they're like, yeah, come on. So I think that both is urgently needed, because if we don't do it personally, then of course structurally in politics, and nothing will change, because you vote for those people in industrialized countries, and those are the hugest CO2 producers. So both is needed 50-50.
Yeah. Some questions go around waste and microplastic.
Yeah.
Because all the vegan yogurt is not in glasses. By the way, I've seen vegan Hafermilch in glasses already. It's there, and maybe the question if the one who asked this always buys the glasses. Usually, that's the question. But in general, the impact of garbage, of waste, on this, if you compare this?
Yeah, bad news, glass is bad. That is the bad news. Glass uses a lot of energy, and most of the time it's not reused, not only during Corona times, but also if you imagine, like, for example, the fruit smoothies. You know, I mean, how many salt and pepper containers can you make out of fruit smoothies that are sold in glass? That's just fake. So the main thing is waste is a huge problem that is going to be addressed because it affects so obviously everybody, like tourism and everybody else, that this is going to be addressed. Probably it's going to go into the direction of plastics that is actually compostable, because most plastic that is theoretically compostable does actually not compost. Glass is also no solution because it uses a lot of energy. So the good news is here that if you use exclusively plant-based food, you are already setting free 75% of the land and 75% of the sweet water. So you already did a huge, massively huge thing. And then the problem of how this is wrapped or packaged becomes a minor problem compared to not being living plant-based. So personally, this is my personal opinion. Somebody else would probably say something different, but the waste problem is going to be addressed. That, for example, if you print the numbers on, let's say, your cheese. Also in Germany, people love pre-packed, plastic-packed cheese in little squares. If you just print on that, how much energy the packaging and the cheese used from the plant-based cheese compared to the milk-based cheese, then it's going to be so obvious how much of a difference this makes that everything else is coming afterwards, because then the consumers, they are asking already. One German company, not German company, but a larger company that is well known in Germany, Simply, they already have to deal with the question on their FAQ page. So one of the FAQs is, why do you still use plastics? And then they're like, well, for hygiene reasons, but we are working on this. Another company, Frosch, they are they're detergents and, you know, cleaning liquids for toilets and soaps and so on. They have the same thing. They have to reply to the question, why are you using still plastics? And then they're working on plastic solutions. So this will easily be solved, the waste problem, if you start to change your life drastically now and so on.
Okay, one question which I see, maybe I'll ask my others to sort by votes. If you want to have them, they are all quite low on the votes, so you still have the chance to vote them up. One question is, if I maybe it's weird to ask at a vegan, but what about boar? So for the others, wildschwein or but general hunted deers and so on.
Yeah. No, it's not weird. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That of course.
What does this mean?
Yeah. Also, okay. Number one, if you're living in a desert or in eternal ice, then of course you need something that is stable as a food. So you have dried fish or dried meat from wild animals, as to transport the energy through time and to just preserve the energy. But we are not talking about that. We're talking about industrialized nations who, as I said, produce most of the CO2, and they do not rely on that. Now, as long as we have this structured nature in which only one type of forest grows, that's a big problem in Germany. Our forests mostly are not forests anymore. They are just these capitalistic use of land. Again, I'm a capitalist. I like capitalism. I don't use the word derogatively, but the bad type of capitalism. As long these forests are just forests in which, of course, you may have too many animals of one type, boars or many other types of animals that you have to shoot to rescue the forest. But the problem is that nature is completely in a misproportion. So the step that we would have to take this year, I didn't mention that. Oh, I did not mention that. Concerning the restructuration of forests and so on, this would have to happen this year. We have to have mixed forests because probably some of you haven't seen that, we have since last year we have such a huge financial problem, financially with our forests, capitalistic forests, and we need to find a solution. So we have to have mixed forests, and in those forests you don't have to shoot the animals anymore, because then you have a natural circle of life. Then you have predators. The predators will feed on, you know, people who are lower on the pyramid of feeding, and then you have other animals. So there will be no need to eat and kill those animals anymore. So again, it's a structural problem. If as soon as we have natural forests, we don't need to shoot animals anymore, and they are taking care of themselves, and the circle of life is going to go on. Even if those animals die, you have the blowflies that I did show you in the beginning, or vultures, or other types of beetles, like, you know, like maybe I should. You know, you see the beetles on the bottom, they are very quickly using even predators. So just leave nature alone. It really works. I'm not an esoteric biologist. I'm a scientific biologist.
I have another question, that is, why are these facts not in the news? Or am I reading the wrong stuff?
Yes, you're reading the wrong stuff. This is really, I hear the question a lot. And in German, there's a very nice word. If you're not from Germany, you know many German words like Gemütlichkeit, very hard to translate. And there's another word in German that means Bringschuld. Bringschuld. That means Germans think that if there's something that is newsworthy, it has to be brought to them on a silver tablet, to their doorstep. And then somebody rings, and then, you know, uses a musical instrument, and then the news is going to be presented to them. That's very German. These news are, for example, if you read The Guardian, that's a newspaper, electronic newspaper also in England. If you just look in The Guardian once a month for half an hour, you will be pushed into this information after 1 minute. The Guardian is for free, or you can also give them £1 or €1 per month if you want to, but you don't have to. And they will, it's their company policy. Since we were talking about company policies, it's their company policy to push you into all of this. You cannot not read this. So, for example, if you would read, this is a good newspaper, they are not extremists, it's very good journalism, they have no political agenda left or right. Well, they're liberal probably, but not left or right. So yes, you're reading the wrong news or watching the wrong news.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Oh, I had a question in the chat also. About that you hear from many climate deniers, how we call them in Germany. It's like that we had extinctions in the past, so where's the difference to the current mass extinction?
Yeah, good question. It's, by the way, it's good that these climate deniers are asking these questions. Many people don't like them, but I like them. I also like Trolle. You know, all of the nerds, I don't know the English term for troll, but probably it's also troll. I like trolls a lot because they are asking the questions that step on your nerves. And as soon as anything steps on your nerves, it means they push the button. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a troll. So I like trolls because they continue to ask this question. One of the answers that I always give is that you can compare it to either long-term trends. So you know what? I'm not going to show you diagrams anymore. Or should I? No, I'll show you one diagram and then I will say something. A diagram that you already saw. I only show diagrams that you already saw. You look at the background level of extinction. That was the diagram that we saw at the end. So from that you can clearly tell that no matter what the main influence is, so you can still be a climate denier. No, I don't care. But since we know that CO2 is the problem, and then you can say, yeah, but what does it have to do with climate? Then I would say, okay, nothing. Let's say it has nothing to do with climate, even though this is clearly proven. But let's play on your field. We know that we have more CO2, and you can see that the background extinction is bad. And then the person would say, well, but I don't care about animals. I hate all animals. And then the next point is, okay, but now we have Corona for the third time. We have such a virus since SARS-1. I was in China at that point, 2002, 2003. I was there personally, me, Benecke. And so I lived through all those corona things. The problem is, the more we enter into areas where the other animals live, remember the elephants, the more we also get the illnesses that would usually be diluted. That's the term since a month now. The more animals you have, the more you have webs of life, and the more the danger of zoonoses, so illnesses that come from animals to humans, are diluted. So if a climate denier says, I don't believe it, then you could say, well, just check the number of pandemias that came from animals in the past and look at the background level of extinction and look at the CO2 values. Probably there were fluctuations that you, for some reason, believe in, that I won't challenge here, but aren't you afraid that human cultures are dying out? I mean, don't you like the way human cultures work now? And then the person has a problem. You can also go back in times, as I showed you, over geological times, 500 million years ago. But if you want to do it more playfully, let's say you have a very stubborn relative and you're sitting Christmas or Easter time or whatever you have, in which culture you live, the whole family is forced to sit together for 3 days, and you know you cannot escape the person. Then you could probably say, let's look at historic battles in history. And then you will very quickly find out that all historic battles in history were climate and weather driven. It was not the person, like look for example at Attila, that's the Hun. That's a very nice thing. Look at what really happened when he retracted. I think from Hungary or something. It was a weather change. Look at the Romans, while the Roman Empire died. It was a weather and climate change. Look at every single historic event that is considered to be the result of a war or something like that. I mean, the wars happened, and of course strategies in wars mattered, but at the end of the day it was weather or climate. Believe it. I mean, you don't have to believe it, just check it up. I mean, it was not the sole factor, not the only factor, but it was a factor that is so hardly overseen that it shows us that the cultures that we know cannot survive the event in which we are right now. It is not possible out of any perspective. Mm-hmm.
We are quite through with the time already. Maybe we go fast to the last question.
Okay.
You have one at your hand?
Yeah, it's more organizational question. A few people have asked whether they can share some of the insights that they learned here, and also the fact that we had this event here at SAP on their social media channels.
Is that a question to me?
Yeah, actually to everyone. I mean, it's but also to you.
Yeah, I recorded everything. So I already talked to your administrators. You can have a internal talk about this. If you want to, I can put it completely online. And of course, if you want to, I will label it SAP. Of course, it's a pleasure. I like nerds and I like nerds who want to change something. And I think your questions were good. And I will do whatever you internally as a team decide. But this is recorded. And I will gladly, if you want, mention on my social media channels that you did this. But I will follow the instructions of your organization team.
Yeah, I think the question was the other way around. Someone wants to share some of his insights from this talk with you on his social media channels. Is that also okay for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
okay.
Don't use probably anything recorded before we decided if we want to make this open and under which conditions. But in general terms, of course, it will be a pleasure. You can also link me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Use the real accounts and just link to the real accounts, and then I can even share your insights. Yes, of course.
Okay,
we'll
great.
Come back to you, and I'm very positive that you can publish the recordings that you made, but we will contact you, and then after you publish that, we can propagate the link to our viewers and to those who could not join the call.
Exactly. And there's also one question about the papers that you've mentioned. Can you provide us the links? Then we can also
easily
them. Okay, good.
But I have to
asked in the chat whether there's also a paper about switching to vegan.
Oh yes,
you can. Oh
yes.
Makes a difference. That would be good.
There is, but the problem is with the literature, depending on which background you have. This, of course, is specialized literature. So, for example, like I mentioned, my wife is a PHP mostly programmer, and as soon as it comes to C++, I wouldn't even know what she's talking about, because when I started to program, I learned Turbo Pascal. You know, I'm very old. So the problem is here, probably you can imagine, these are very narrowly restricted fields. But for example, just the dying out things like Krefeld Study, antelopes dying out, and so on, or the ones relating to the sixth extinction or so, that is very easy. But to be honest, this can very easily be Googled. I will gladly provide you with the papers.
Okay.
But but no, I will do it gladly. Just tell it to me, and then I will compile something for you. But if you look for something that is already like made more easily to understand concerning, like, you know, the field out of which you come, you can also use, for example, The Guardian and so on, because they also give the original papers.
Yeah, okay,
reference.
I totally agree. Thank you.
Many thanks.
I could sum up one question, which is maybe, one open and one closing question. If you have to say something to BioArt directly, the percentage, the ratio of biomass for mammals and maybe cattle, or do you?
Yeah, of course. Yes. You for the cattle, I do that with the students. I'm sorry to treat you like students now, but please don't take this wrongly. But I don't want to tell you concerning the cattle, because you probably wouldn't believe me. You can very easily Google that. Cattle, amount of cattle, biomass of cattle, or species diversity compared to all other, let's say, vertebrates. Animals who have a vertebra on the planet. That's very easy to Google. But to make it brief, I already told you about the birds. Like approximately 90% of birds are chicken, used for human consumption. They are killed in a very brutal ways, like all other meat that you eat. That's why I labeled the bio-meat thing a complete lie, personally. As a biologist, I've seen animals slaughtered already when I was young. I'm not afraid of that. I can see death. I'm not afraid of killing and dying. That is nothing that, is something that just causes emotions. I'm talking about very on a factual level here. And this is just, this is the worst stigma that we are going to have in the next 20 years, when our kids are going to ask you, why did you accept that all these animals were bred for human purposes and then killed in such a bestialic and unacceptable way. Every time you put a piece of bacon on your Schrippe, Butterbrot, or whatever you do, you are directly contributing to the torture and brutal killing, and also to the catastrophic life conditions of these animals. The same refers to eggs and milk. So this is why I don't want to show you the numbers. Please look it up. You are not going to believe it. Yeah.
Insect food was asked.
Insect food is not of any help. Any type of monoculture, trees, insects, fish, shrimp, which is a big thing now, shrimp, any type of monoculture is the use of the capitalistic use that is not embedded in the circle of life and in the net of life, is going to lead to diseases that are going to enrich in such an environment. Then you have catastrophic events, either pandemias, going to cattle, going to swine, to pigs, going to humans, or to just the dying of these trees, and so on and so on. The only known way, like I said, consent in scientific literature is to switch to a completely plant-based diet. It's the only known way.
I guess this is also the answer for the pesticides, which in the beginning was the opener, all the pesticides, and that's because there is an open question. But
restricted use of pesticides is probably possible. Restricted use of pesticides, even neonicotinoids, is probably possible because bio-vegan may use too much land. So probably there has to be a mixture. But if you use plants, then you, like I said, so much land and water is getting to set free that even the neonicotinoids are probably not a problem anymore in restricted spots.
ask the others if they have a question. As last question, I would refer to the question from the beginning with the insect hotel of yours.
Ah, yeah.
Or
yes,
go through this.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else has over.
Well, I promise to make it quick. Use insect hotels, because for the first time in your life, maybe if you're not a biologist, you will see how much the plants that you wildly grow, the insect hotels, but also the wood, because sometimes they use the wood, the insects, in the first year, in the second year they don't like it, and the next year it's different again. Then sometimes they like hardwood, sometimes they like bamboo, sometimes they like schilf, like the plants that are growing out of the water. Then in your flower pot, depending on if it's south or north or southeast, they're totally different plants. All of a sudden a plant appears that you have never seen in your life before. Do it, because you and your kids and everybody else is going to learn one summer. I did it last summer. You can look it up on my Instagram and Facebook profile. We posted thousands of postings of just stupid little plants, stupid little animals that anybody found. We just posted it, and it 90% of the things that lay people, by just not interfering with their balcony, sent me, I had never seen in my life before and not known before. So yes, do it, because it will give you a huge kick into the direction of natural nets and the net of life and the circle of life. So yes, do it.
Many thanks. Also for the time you took to answer our questions. We received a lot of positive feedback already in the chat. Many thanks to you. And
no, thanks to the really, in this particular case, it's true and not just a slimy comment. Really, the organizers here did it. So it was a pleasure and an honor. Really, thank you that you, as a huge company and as employees, did that, because that never happened before, at least not in my life. So thank you.
Many thanks for the compliment.
Yeah,
we are a kind of grassroots initiative. We call ourselves SAP Employees for Climate. So we are coordinated with some management people, especially our sustainability department, but we are on our own.
But probably that's going to change. My personal thing is, talk to the Fridays kids, because they don't know, they are not so much science-based. I mean, Greta and some others, they very much refer to science, but they are also a political movement, of course. And you as nerds, you will have a lot of fun, and I mean really fun. It's enjoyable to find out if what they say, how this is data related, and what you were also asking, what is the most efficient thing? What should we do first? Or as you were asking about the energy barriers to push Earth up, hot Earth and so on. So you as adults who have a training, let's call it a nerd personality and training, you will have a lot of fun. Just go to the kids. They will teach you a lot, really.
Go to Fridays for Future demos as well.
Yes.
While we are not kids any longer.
Yeah, no, that's what I meant. No, oh, sorry, that was not spoken rightly. I mean, go to the demonstrations, listen to them. They don't need us. They do not need us. Just listen to what they say, and then just bring it back to your sustainability department, and you're like, because they always come up with relatively youthful, interesting ideas. Yeah.
Thanks again.
Pleasure.
I think we close it up, the meeting for now, and we will have more talks like that in the future.